Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
This is Scott.
This is Nancy.
Hope everyone's having a wonderful start to their week, their evening. And as promised, we are back again. We are going to be doing another live this coming Thursday as well. And tonight, what we're talking about are actually, Nancy pointed it out, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And we always talk about people that we look up to, people that are the go-to people that we listen to, and we noticed that there were three consistent trends of all thought leaders and experts. All thought leaders and experts have. Yeah, we are nonstop, Brooke. I know. We keep going. Thank you. I appreciate that. You're gonna love this too, Brooke. So hang in there. And if you're just coming on, as Brooke has done, please say hi and where you're coming in from. We would love to hear from you. Tag some teammates. Share this video. And we noticed that there were three consistent themes. You want to peek in?
You're my
There she
alpha
is. Peekaboo. Three things that top experts and thought leaders
have in common.
Business. It's an inside
Your
joke.
spelling.
It's an inside joke.
Yeah.
So there are three things that all thought leaders and experts have in common. And I challenge you, and it may be all three of these, it may be two of them, but I guarantee you, all thought leaders and all experts that you all look up to and listen to and follow, and I'm saying the big minds have in common. Number one, they all have
Wait.
what? Okay.
So yeah. So the reason why we're talking about this too is because it came up because I do a lot of work with personal brands, right? I mean, that's what, Scott and I, we're kind of delving into really focusing on helping people who are looking to build their personal brands. And that's how this conversation came up. Sorry, I just wanted to we're just eating dinner tonight and, the topic came up.
Boom.
We were like, all right, for people who are really building their personal brands and want to become an expert, right? Like that person who wants to be an expert in their industry, what things do they always have? And we were just like, oh, three things, right? So we're going to talk about them now. Okay, now go.
And it's really interesting because we just kept spitting names back and forth, and I'm like, yes, and she's like, yes, and I'm like, yes, and I'm like, yes, and I'm like, oh my God, there is a theme. So there's three things. Number one, all experts and thought leaders have a podcast. Nancy.
True story. So for those of you out there, if any of you have a podcast, that's awesome. For anyone who's, out there wondering or thinking about it, like, oh, can someone like me start a podcast? Absolutely. There are podcasts on every different topic you could imagine. In fact, I follow some obscure ones. I like to actually tune in and listen to stories. One of my favorites, and it's not so obscure, it's actually mainstream, but I love Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard. It's just being random, fun, and real, and it's mostly movie stars. But whenever I think of the top influencers, when I think of the top experts, right? And if I'm going to spend my time listening to a podcast, aside from Armchair Expert and a couple others, I want to learn something. So I have a routine that I actually, after I get out of the shower, I'll have a podcast kind of queued up. And I specifically like to pick podcasts where the episodes are only about 15 minutes long, 10 to 15. I like the nuggets, right? I like the concentrated goodness. And so I picked out some podcasts that I listen to from some of my favorite experts, right? So if you guys are out there, I'm just going to name a couple just to peek behind the curtain of what I like and to obviously share because I found them incredibly useful. The first would be Scott Aaron's. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, Scott Aaron's podcast is wonderful. But no, so Stu McLaren is an online internet marketer. If you guys have ever heard of, top people online, right? We've got the Amy Porterfields, the Marie Forleos, the Jasmine Stars. In fact, he's worked with Tony Robbins. He has worked
all the big
with
names.
The big names.
James
in
Wedmore.
The online marketing world. And so, of course, you want to pick someone who knows what they're talking about, right? So Stu McLaren's episodes are solid gold. I've been spreading his praises for a while now, and all my clients know that I rant and rave about him because I think he's wonderful. He goes on like kind of hiatuses, and so he's actually just started again. When he launches, he does a little pause, takes some time off of the podcast, and then he's back in, and he's very relevant. He is very applicable to what is going on in the market right now. His podcasts have caused me to take extreme action in certain areas. In fact, I signed up for an Interact, which is a quiz lead magnet program from one of his podcasts that I made Scott listen to because it was so epic.
So good.
But anyway, amazing podcast, right? And that's Stu McLaren. Name a couple, right? We were thinking.
I love Robin Sharma.
Great
he's and his episodes have even become more streamlined. He used to do regular long form, but they're like 2 minutes of greatness now.
Nuggets.
And they're amazing. And Robin Sharma, so he has his podcast, he has his books, The 5 a.m. Club, The Leader Who Had No Title, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Stu McLaren has a book. No?
What are you talking about? We're talking about podcasts.
No, I'm just saying, like, a lot of the things that people have.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Yeah.
that add to the credibility. But also, if you look at anyone that you're auditorily listening to, you obviously consider them an expert and a thought leader because you're actually taking the time. Chris Harder is another person.
Yeah, For the Love of Money
For the Love of Money podcast.
Excellent.
That we love that. And again, to Nancy said it, but there's a lot of people in network marketing and online marketing that listen to my podcast because they consider me an expert and a thought leader within my space. And it does put you in that realm. And I'll go back to something that Nancy said, and she goes, well, can I even have a podcast? All right. So I'll tell you this. I connected with a guy on LinkedIn, and we ended up doing a pod swap. And he interviewed me on his, and I said, all right, what's your podcast about? And he goes, well, I have two. One's a business one. And I said, oh, what's the other one? He goes, it's about pizza shops. I said, it's about what? He goes, well, I've owned a string of pizza shops, and I kept looking for resources and things out there that could help me grow my business, and there was nothing, so I created it myself, and I have this dedicated following of all these pizza shop owners from all over the country and the world that now listen to my podcast, and I do consulting and coaching for them now. And I'm like, oh my God, you could literally have a podcast about anything that is relevant to you and your zone of genius.
Absolutely. I mean, all day long, I've talked to real estate agents that have localized podcasts where they actually feature certain things in their cities or towns that they actually do business in, and they interview local business owners and they get to know the local community. What better way to be a community influencer? So that's just another example. You don't have to create some podcast that's some wild and crazy idea. It's like, no, this is a cool podcast and you can speak on these things.
Yeah, just type Y or yes in the chat box if you're live or on the replay. Number one, if you listen to a podcast, but what podcast do you listen to? And again, you're going to start to realize that the people that you're listening to, you consider experts. You consider thought leaders because, again, there are so many people that have podcasts, and there's so many. And we were the other day we were looking. We always look at competitors. We always look to see what other people are doing within our space. So we, if there's anything new. And we looked at this one marketing podcast, and the woman stopped like a year and a half ago. And another one that we loved was Amy Schumer's.
Oh,
And
Well,
It's
she's taken some time off.
3 girls and
One guy.
no,
One Keith.
what?
One,
3 girls,
one Keith.
3 girls, 1 Keith. And you know,
Just so random.
yeah, she just had a baby, so she took some time off, but we loved her podcast. I remember listening to that. And everyone knows Joe Rogan, Lewis Howes. You know, these are all podcasts that people really admire the people. So if you want to start stepping into that expert role, that thought leadership role, start a podcast. It's not hard. And it's something that we realize people are struggling with. There's a gap there. And it's something that anyone can learn how to do.
Yeah. And can we park there for like a second? Do I have permission? Okay, yeah, sorry. I'm like on fire tonight. So I just want to stop. I wrote a couple notes. You know, Scott knows I always jot a couple bullet points, but you know, I want to talk about what an expert is, right? Because a lot of people, again, they get hung up and they think, oh, an expert is this, you know, celebrity figure,
PhD,
you know, or someone who has their PhD and whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so I read a Harvard Business Review article, and it was specifically breaking down what an expert, or what is considered, you know, a person who's an expert. And one of the things that really stuck out was deliberate practice, right? Meaning an intentional practice of something, okay? Meaning you're not throwing spaghetti against a wall. You can focus on things you know how to do. How many of you out there have been doing something, and this is my challenge for you, for 5 years or more, okay? 5 years or more. I was in a leadership role for over 10 years. I managed teams. I did this day in, day out. I lived, I breathed, you know, I breathed it. Is that correct? Breathed it? Whatever.
Breathe.
Yeah, anyway.
Breathe it?
I was in a leadership role. So there are things about leadership. You know, I was on the phone with a family member the other day giving her tips on, you know, how to
lead her
step
team.
into her leadership role. And so it's things that you learn how to talk about because you do it consistently. You know, whether you're a network marketer, whether you're someone who is on here who is a business coach or a financial advisor, or you're in a certain space in your industry and you know certain things, do not discount that, okay? And there are other people just like you who are looking for some guidance, right? You know, I even think about my accountant, and sometimes he jumps on here. So Jeffy, if you jump on, I'm thinking about you. But he is amazing because he has such a wealth of knowledge, and the amount of knowledge cramming he does to make sure that he is on point for his clients is so incredibly impressive. Every single week, so I help him with his social media, getting it posted and everything. Every week he writes an article. He writes, which we turn into an email, like newsletter. He writes that article. We also turn it into he puts it in the newspaper. He also does a Facebook Live on it. He does different content topics and an article on LinkedIn. It's gold, and it's so educational, and he is an expert authority because he has read the book on the newest, latest PPP trend, or the latest, you know, business.
His zone of genius.
It's his zone of genius, and honestly, there are so many new accountants and clients and potential people who could really benefit from that information, right? Cut through the noise and the baloney and go straight to the facts, right? And so he is just a wealth of knowledge. So anyway, just on that same note is, you know, as an expert, your goals are to continue to improve those skills that you already have, right? Extending the reach of those skills and really just honing in on what you're good at. In fact, there was a really cool quote. I did not write it down, but it's, think about what and who you are and what you're good at. Okay, stop thinking of the things you want to be good at, or those things that you're just like, I gotta learn. Maybe I'll spend an extra 5 years, you know. No, what are you good at now? What are the things that you like to talk about? You know, Scott said it the other day. Actually, we were on a content planning call, and he goes, guys, what could you talk about? If someone said right now, I want you to jump up on stage and I want you to talk about something for 15 minutes straight with no prep.
No script.
You know, what are those things that you would talk about? What are those expert ideas that you would have? What is that thing you would write a book on, right? Like, what is that for you? And the reason why we're digging into this so much is because, and again, I'm a little fired up, but it's like, we have one life to live. We have so many things. We have so many hours in the day and whatever, but I want you guys to start thinking about getting intentional about where you want to be, right? Not even in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You know, what is it that's going to be different about this year that was the same, you know, as last? Like, what is going to be different, and how can you set yourself and your personal brand apart from others, right? And it does take time to become an expert, but I guarantee you, all of you on here, for at least 5 years, you have experience in something, okay? And you actually are an expert in certain things, okay? So, sorry.
I mean, it's the truth. I think a lot of people tend to overthink the process and overcomplicate the process. And yeah, we did this with our clients. We did this this quarterly strategy session, and I challenged them, and I said, stop overthinking. I said, write down on a piece of paper if some agency or association called you and said, hey, hey, we want you to speak on stage in about 30 minutes for 15 minutes. Come over here. What could that 15-minute speech be on where you don't need any help whatsoever? You can just get up there and jam out. Yeah. And I can think of like 5 or 6 things that I could talk. And I know it only has to be 1 or 2. Yeah. And you can build upon that. And I can't express to you, I know she's probably not on her, but Emily Goff is a good friend of mine. She's a podcast coach. And, you know, she was on my podcast and she shared with me, she goes, the most intimate experience for anyone is actually listening to a podcast, because you're blocking everything else out. You have your earbuds in and that person is speaking directly into your brain. It's how you build that know, like, and trust.
Oh, yeah. And having, interviews and stuff like that.
No one buys anything or hires anyone that they don't know, they don't like, and they don't trust. And it takes time to warm people up. And again, we can only talk to so many people in a day. But when you have a podcast, you can reach hundreds of people every single episode. And just like I announced this, I mean, Nancy and I are still amazed that my podcast has been downloaded over 100,000 times. It's been listened to over 100,000 times. That is unbelievable to think about, that impact. And you want to be that expert. It's time to do something different. You know, Brooke was on a training I just did for a network marketing team right before this. And I always talk about be a salmon in a world of fish. Instead of being the podcast listener, be the podcast producer. You produce a podcast that people listen to now. You step into that authoritative and leadership role and watch what happens. So that's number 1. Number 2, the most true commonality that all experts and thought leaders have outside of a podcast is a book. Peekaboo. A book. Why is a book so important?
Yeah, so I think looking back, so let's rewind about 3 years ago, right?
Almost 2 years ago.
2.5, maybe? I don't know. It's been about
February will be 2 years.
Yeah, so about 2.5 years ago. Okay. So we were in my living room and we were walking around and we were kind of talking and we were having a similar conversation than we did today, right? Like, what are the experts, right? What is that way to obviously set yourself apart as an expert and that authority leader, you know, in your industry? I
was venting.
And
I was like, I was frustrated. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. You know, I'm very good at what I do. I had just launched the podcast and I'm like, I need to do something to...
No, you hadn't done the podcast yet.
Oh, that's right, because we Yeah,
this... that was the other idea.
This is about 2.5 years ago. This is even before... My podcast came out in November of 2018.
Yeah.
This is like March of 2018.
Yeah.
This is almost 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember I was just so frustrated because I knew I could be doing more. I knew I could be impacting more people. And Nancy just kind of threw out, she's like...
I always do that to him. I'm like, let's do this, right? Let's whatever. And the commonality, right? So back to what Scott shared with you, right? This little nugget is a book, right? So most people, most thought leaders, most experts have a book, right? They have that little author, you know, next to their name. So we thought about it, and here we are walking around in the living room. We're like, you have done so many trainings. You have so much content. You have an amazing program. You know, let's write a book. And so Scott started that journey of, you know, writing his book and getting that going. And
it took 11 months.
Yeah, it took about 11 months. And you know what? It's an amazing book. It was a bestseller. We learn the ins and outs of what it takes to actually start to finish, right? Get this book created, get it published, size, formatted, published, and put
Everything.
on, we self-published it on Amazon. And we also went through the launch process of actually, getting it out there, getting reviews, having contests. We went through that. And so, I mean, in your opinion, what has having a book done for your business?
Everything. When you and the book, crazy enough, I checked last week, and it's still 2 years later in the top 100 in 3 categories and in the top 25 in 1. 2 years later, it still sells
How many?
2 to 3 copies a day.
2 to 3 copies a day.
Every single day. So, and I can't tell you how many people reach out to me on LinkedIn. They're like, hey, reading your book, or it's Audible picked it up, which was incredible. When people reach out to me, they're like, oh my God, I'm talking to the author of this book.
Ooh.
It's,
Yeah.
yes, it's a big deal to them. It's not a big deal to me. I love connecting with people. But when you can literally say, here is my book, like you and my other books. So, and again, we did all this ourselves. We learned the process of this. So when you have a book, it's taking that expert and thought leader that you are, and it shoots it to the moon. Because now you're not only in that thought leader and that expert space, but you're considered a professional in that space. You are a sought after person. When you have a book that's published and accredited and on Amazon, where it and the other crazy thing is it's approaching 100 reviews, which is unbelievable. But again, I wrote this book with the intention. Thank you. Brooke said she's looking it up on Amazon right now. Yeah, if you just type in Scott Aaron, it'll come up. And what I love about this book, it is not fluff.
Solid. Yeah.
Nancy and I were sick and tired of reading books that were fluffy, that kind of skirted around what to do. We read so many books, we're like, what the hell was that?
It's like, oh, the biggest
It didn't tell you how to do anything.
Overview.
And that's the thing. You can take those thoughts, those ideas that you have as a podcast, and it takes time, but you can absolutely turn that into a self-published book. You don't need a publisher. All you need is someone to format it, which we know how to do, put it up on Amazon, the right categories, which we know how to do, and also launch it properly to create buzz around it so it can become a #1 new release and bestseller and be a reoccurring residual income source. And again, I'm going to go down this hole just for 1 second. So we always talk about residual income, active income, leveraged income. This book pays me every single month, and I only had to write it once. The great thing about a book is you write it one time, it will pay you for life. I wrote 3 books. I get 3 checks every single month from Amazon for life. And if you really, and think about all those experts, the Robin Sharmas, book, podcast, Lewis Howes, book, podcast, all of those great leaders, Gary Vaynerchuk, books, podcast, they all have something in common. If you want to be taken seriously, if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to live and create the best life possible, you want to impact the most people, you want to spread your message as far as you can only do it so much with social media. Remember, social media is rented land. Podcasting is a whole separate platform. A book is a whole separate platform. You literally start connecting with people all over the world because you are that much more accessible.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, Scott mentioned the residual of the book itself, but think about, again, when you're trying to build that know, like, and trust factor, this speeds up the process, right? As far as the know, like, and trust factor, right? People reading the book, like he even said, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm speaking to Scott. So it's like, it up levels you by so much.
I can't tell you how many people have read this book, and I tell you exactly what to do. Contact me after, and then hire me. Because, instead of me trying to figure out how to put the piece into place in the book, I can actually, his number's right there, his email's there. I'm just going to contact the author and see how I can work with them. And it becomes an extra revenue source for you.
Yeah, and it's not just like, there's so much.
It's the impact behind it.
Well, it's the impact behind it. And I know there's so many people out there who are like, oh, I want to write a book one day or someday or whatever. The other thing I like about it, and why we're kind of talking about this, is writing a book also forces you, right? Whenever I talked about being an expert, right, it forces you to really hone in on your craft, be deliberate, right? It causes you to actually do a little research because you don't want to write a book that's garbage. You want to really hone in and make sure that you're sharing the best value possible. So I love to kill multiple birds with one stone. So most likely this stuff that you're writing this book about is also stuff you should be talking about on LinkedIn or on social media, right? It should be stuff that you're talking about with your clients and with people who are looking to hire you. It should be the stuff that you're eating, sleeping, breathing anyway. So if we're going to do that, let's up our game, make sure we're, we are fully knowledgeable about what we're talking about, and let's write a book. So anyway, just throwing that out there.
Now, the final thing is this, and what you have to think about is, what does having a book, and I don't care what profession you're in. I don't care if you're a network marketer, you're a business coach, you're in insurance. Anyone can have a book and a podcast. And here's what it does. At the end of the day, it builds your brick house. There she is. Of credibility. Everyone, again, this goes back to the know, like, and trust. People work with people that they know, they like, and they trust. And two of the best ways to build that know, like, and trust and that credibility is having a podcast and having a book. And I can absolutely tell you, and Nancy can tell you as well, it is much easier than you think it is. Because we've done it. Once someone figures it out and does it and succeeds with it, it's easy to teach because it's been done. Now, you don't have to spend the last 3.5 years like we have trying to figure it out. Now that process can be sped up because we've built a system and we have it in place, and we can now help others do the same thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so the brick house of credibility, I like to use that all the time. And I'm going back to, again, like, conversations Scott and I have had in the past. I have something I call, what do you say? The method I use?
What is it? Is it kind? Is it
the
truthful?
M&M.
Is it necessary? The M&M just come straight out.
Yeah, so I have something.
It's from 8 Mile.
So I have the M&M method. And if anyone has ever seen
8 Mile.
8 Mile, yeah, it's so the rapper Eminem's in it. Well, whenever he gets up for the rap battle, he says all the things that the other rapper could possibly say bad about him. Here, he puts it out on the table. He's like, yes, I'm this. Yes, I'm that. Yeah, I'm whatever. But. So I started thinking about it, and I'm like, man, that's what we should do. Like, for you, like, we need to build your brick house of credibility, meaning any objection someone can come at you, right? Like, you don't have enough recommendations. How many recommendations do you have?
On LinkedIn?
Yeah.
450?
450. I don't think you'll meet anyone who has more.
I haven't met one yet.
So, yeah, he's probably in the Guinness Book of World Records. Okay, so, recommendations, right? People, clients, testimonials, things like that, right? That's part of your brick house of credibility. Case studies, past things that you've done with clients,
Client
right?
success.
Those stories, you guys should be capturing those, right? Those are part of your brick house. Articles, content. We already talked about books, podcasts, whatnot. What can you teach topics on? Let's say if you're a part of a professional organization, or if you have a certification, that's other ways you can add badges, right, to your brick house. It's like, all right, you're in this, so you must be up to speed on certain things. Featured in, right? So that's a lot of, in fact, we're hearing the word PR a lot, in the entrepreneurial space and with business coaches. This is the year, I feel, of like PR. It's like everybody wants to be in magazines, featured on Forbes, be in TV, all that good stuff. But the one thing I want to go back to is think about the titles next to your name, what you could have, right? Host, author, speaker,
Podcaster.
host.
Podcast host.
Yeah. So anyway, so
Host. Podcast host.
yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
So anyway, just some things I wanted to plant some seeds, guys. You know, if not now, when? And you know, I want you to really get focused. In fact, I wrote a blog post that's going out for next week on my website, and it's all about focus, right? And the best people, right? The top leaders, the top influencers, the top experts know that focus is key to success,
Yeah.
right? And I want you guys to just think and really focus on what is your zone of genius? What are you an expert in? What could you go out there and write a book about? And I want you to actually legit start thinking about it.
Write it down. And the fun thing is, during our 5-day intensive that starts next week,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Nancy and I are actually going to be digging into more about how LinkedIn can be leveraged into becoming that expert authority by leveraging it into blogs and podcasts and books, and how it all synergistically goes together. So we're going to start talking more about that. And again, if you're not a part of the intensive, Nancy and I left a registration link in the description of this, or if you can't find it, just type, just type I want in the chat box, either live or on the replay, and we will send you the link. It's free. It's 5 days. It starts this Monday, the 18th, through Thursday and Friday, Monday through Thursday. It's from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. Friday is from 5 to 6. There's going to be recordings after every single one, so if you can't make it, it's okay. All the registrants will be emailed a link where they will be able to access the recordings till the following Tuesday. And we have some special things planned, and we really want people to understand by the end of those 5 days, what you're going to take away from that is, if you could have laser focus on just one platform, one focus, one program for all of 2021, your business will change forever.
It's truth.
So guys, thank you so much for joining. Again, if you're coming in on the replay, #replay, would love to hear from you. If you want in to the free 5-day intensive, type I want in. We will send you the link. Love and gratitude, and we'll see you Thursday. Bye, everybody.